Look, I know I'm biased, but I really enjoyed this episode.
Are you implying you don't normally? But I really enjoyed this one too. It was really good.
Where did we start?
It was so long ago, I can't remember where we started, but I think it was talking about the 1013 party last week and reflecting on some of the speakers.
Yeah, so we chatted about the talk with Alex Harper from SwiftX, and then we went into a little bit more depth unpacking Simon Beard's story and some of the takeaways.
Simon Beard's just awesome. Just talk about a man crush.
Yeah. And then we spoke about Charlie Munger and his passing and reflecting on some of his finest comments and great little anecdotes.
Yeah, which led us to kick off into this area around growth, kick-starting with, there was an article about 33 years at the top of startups. What can we learn from that? What maybe can't we learn? Which dovetailed into founding and funding is down. We've always discussed about funding being down, but just some data out of the US around founding being down.
Do you want to go next, Jack?
Yeah, and then we discussed why growth is getting harder and then talked about some of the data from Carter.
We made a quick plea to Rode Microphones to grow in a sustainable and healthy way so we can continue to use your products.
And then really a lot of it was just with some, I think the traditional term is growth hacking, but these are all these little experiments you can do away from traditional marketing and sales. And we did that by taking a 20 VC podcast with Harry Stebbings and breaking it up into some component parts and then just adding our little bits to it. And I enjoyed that because I think there's a lot in there for founders. And as we said, it's not a replacement for listening to that episode, and we're going to put it in the show notes and highly recommend that you do. But we've added a few thoughts from ourselves.
Yeah, lots to unpack. And so let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, lads.
How are we?
Awesome. I'm feeling energized. We had our little tribe. We had the little tribe Chrissy drinks last night.
Oh, did we? Oh, Aaron.
I was sharing for the listeners, but I'm feeling energized after seeing everyone. It was great.
Given I'm the old man and pulled the pin first, I believe you were second, and Jack, you did the right thing and chaperoned everyone.
No, I didn't leave too much long. I think they went on and went out after I left, so I can't claim that.
You didn't do Jaeger bombs at the casino?
No Jaeger bombs at the casino.
We do have a big week this week. We've got the Brisbane Angels Christmas party tonight, so look forward to that. That's a good little ecosystem. And then dinner with a portfolio company, then our own little get-together, and then my darling wife decided to organise family photos for the Friday afternoon after our lunch. So I am going to be 3 sheets to the wind, trying to smile and behave for the photos that she's been trying to get this, 4 months now since Maggie was born. And I can just see relationship repair on the horizon.
Is that like you gone?
Mate, I'm looking forward to seeing the photo.
Yeah, so it'll just be Dad's looking a little bit special. And that's after last week we had the 1013 Runway party, which was really great.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Like kicking off with the Founders Forum on the Thursday and then the 1013 conference on the Friday and then the drinks Friday night. They always put on a great event. Like great lineup of speakers, brings everyone together. Good vibes. It was great.
Yeah. When we arrived, I think they kicked off with the interview with Alex Harper, who was one of the founders of Swift FTX. And that was really interesting. Steve gave him hell. Steve Baxter tore him to shreds. But
yeah, SwiftX. But what a story, though. They've had quite the ride and phenomenal growth. And yeah, Steve in his classic style, giving him a bit of curry at different points. But that was a great kickoff. And then after that, there was Joel Pobar, who used to be quite senior at Facebook and now deep in AI. And like a lot of his charts on AI, like that just blew my mind. I think I'm still processing a lot of what Joel actually shared from that. And especially the impact on the future of data centers as well and computational power. And it made me want to rush out and buy shares in NVIDIA despite their current valuation.
Yeah, that ship's going to continue.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I took away from that was almost the inevitability of the computing power connecting with true general artificial intelligence. The way he explained it and the charts that he used and the science that he brought to it, it didn't leave much ambiguity to this is where we're heading. So you better get ready. And I have a sneaking suspicion one of the first things that gets taken out and automated is emerging venture capital firms, but let's put that to one side.
Actually, that was a conversation last night with some of the investors, was around exactly that. Their view was they think we're actually okay because of the relationship game of what we do. But
all jokes aside, when I think about the value that we try and add, the relationships we try and create, and the ability to help people navigate waters, I think that's our defensibility. If all you're trying to do is find good deals from a financial perspective, you're toast. And I think it's the same for any of our companies. If you're not able to leverage network, community, relationships, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And then they had Simon Beard, founder of Culture King, on the stage, and he was phenomenal. Like his
Just
energy.
amazing. Like just shoes and shirts. And he admitted we took the US style and we sold that shit back to them. But just amazing.
Yeah, whatever he's selling, I wanted to buy it. It was just his energy on the stage, and you can just see the culture he's built and how he's gone about it. Like, it's infectious.
So I'm going to make a prediction, and I think I've already discussed this. He will buy Culture Kings back for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
I think with who bought them, the debt in there, what's happened, and his energy, it's very hard to systemize that energy and that way of thinking. And then when the new owner has different vision, different debt structures, that's going to lead to an absolute takedown of everything that they bought. That's going to lead to the performance falling over. And if he wants it, he will be able to carry pack of this thing and buy it back for cents on the dollar and rebuild it, bring that energy back.
Yeah, and to give a bit of an idea for the listeners that didn't hear or haven't heard someone speak, like at their peak, they were doing 2.5x revenue compared to Foot Locker, and they only had 8 retail stores compared to Foot Locker's 8. His culture, the results speak for themselves. What he's done was phenomenal.
Yeah, and shunned a lot of traditional business stuff that says that you would have to have really complex incentive structures and really hardcore reward systems and all of that, and built a culture that people wanted to be in, that wanted to be there, that were there for far more than the dollars at that retail level, and built a juggernaut that he got 320 something million in cash and the rest in shares. But through all of that, talked about the complementary nature of him and his wife and how they got together, and then what she would do in the business around systems, process, controls, conservatism. I got an absolute little chuckle out of, she never wanted to have less than 10 million in the bank. And those complementary teams that can retain high trust and respect and see the value that the other party is bringing that they themselves can't bring, but have respect for it, even though inevitably there'll be some times of conflict. They are an absolute case study in that working.
Yeah, another point that I really loved, the analogy you used about being resource constraint and always running close to the rev line. And he gave the example, he always had one less team member on the floor than he needed, just because as soon as he had too many staff members on the floor and not enough things to do, people got lazy. So he always needed to have that momentum and keep them on the front foot.
But I love that analogy of the rev limiter, especially if you think of it in the context of the life cycle. Life cycles is all about making changes between different phases. And his point was, if you're revving too low and you change it into the next gear down, it's really going to bog you down. And that's where you can think about systems, process, controls. You've actually got to have a certain momentum. You've got to have a little bit of vibration, a little bit of shake, a little bit of screech. And then that's the right time to shove the gear down. Whereas sometimes founders think, or they get told, that they have to shift that gear down a little too early, and it just pulls the whole thing down because it just doesn't have the revs to keep it moving.
Yeah, there were so many good little nuggets and takeaways. Like, too many resources leads to B-grade behavior because someone can just think someone else is going to pick this up, and not using bonuses or commissions because I like this little cheeky quote about then you end up with the Harvey Norman experience of being upsold the $250 power board. It's just like, but that the emphasis he had on the customer experience, like from the moment a customer walks in, you want your sales staff just be giving them this energy, and because of that, selecting staff, and he called it like gamification of the teams, to actually really focus on the experience of the customer, not the commission that they might get on a sale.
But what I liked about it is all of those ideas were really actionable.
Yeah.
It's not like this standard shit of really successful people that give you all this high-level generic crap that you can't actually follow or learn from. So, yeah, no, that was really good. Thank you, 1013. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, that was awesome. To Stu and the team and Steve and others, that great event. already looking forward to next year's one.
Yeah. One little item before I'd forgotten a little bit. Last week we spoke about Edrolo, and there'd been an article out about intimating that they had cut a lot of staff. It was intimating they weren't doing all that well and put AI to blame a little bit. And because we were going to do an episode that was focused on AI, we took that article and ran with it. I had a call from one of the shareholders who's a friend of the podcast, and we had a little bit of a chat because his view was that article was so poorly researched, and actually they are leveraging AI to a point where they actually had a better quarter than they thought, but what they're learning is that they can become a whole lot more efficient. They can deliver a whole lot more customer outcomes. And we discussed that they were nothing like the Chegg example that we provided. And the inevitability of AI is that it's going to lead to a whole lot of efficiencies, and those that can use it well can still get growth for that end customer. And that sounds like the path that they're on. But yeah, it really made me question the world and my life that an article didn't get everything right. Like, how could that happen?
Yes.
You be the professional one. But I think the important bit with some of these things, and this investor and I spoke about, if you recall, Luke Anir in his podcast spoke about the bizarreness of the Australian system allowing all sorts of information that actually isn't that helpful for governance. It doesn't have any governance outcomes, but then allows things to be targeted in a way that's not correct, that then creates unintended consequences and will have a damaging effect on entrepreneurial ecosystems. And we did have an example here of, if you're a founder that's going to constantly come under attack for very basic things like, are you going to question it? And then even then, the financial literacy amongst financial journalism probably isn't that high, as we've seen time and time again. And this investor and I had a little chuckle where he got a call from a journo once, and the angle, he couldn't quite work out what the angle was, but the story seemed to be around tax evasion. And he was just trying to understand that. But in the accounts, which most companies have, is a line, deferred tax asset. And the journo was like, the deferring of that is some kind of tax evasion. He's like, fuck, mate. It's an accounting standard
practice
thing.
Oh, far out.
So anyway, a slight diversion, but I think it's just important to acknowledge that the stuff that we pull out of articles, please, by all means, if our analysis of it is not correct, let's have a chat, or if you've got a different perspective, let's go through it. Our goal is, how do we help founders? How do we help investors?
Yeah, a good little reminder for us, but I think a reminder for everyone. Just because there's a financial journalist doesn't mean they actually understand finances and the basics.
And we may have a podcast which smells and looks a bit like media, but we are in no way journalists. We are a few morons that get together and put stuff out into the world, and that probably has an incredibly low retention rate, but we're too scared to actually look at the dashboard.
Yeah. And our 7 listeners are well aware of us and our biases. So.
Yeah. Now, another thing that happened last week, which was sad, but was the passing of Charlie Munger.
Yeah, very sad. I'm a huge Charlie Munger fan. I love a lot of his quotes and his quirks and cheekiness. Yeah. Real loss, actually, in his passing.
Always quiet. Both him and Warren. One of the favourite ones that isn't actually Charlie's, I think it's attributed to Warren, is the chains of bad habits are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. and that is me. That is me in a box. And that is also the sort of thing I keep in the back of my head with my parenting, is that how do you not let the little chains of bad habits that they're not going to feel, but you can see, but you've got to step in and not preside over, not get so big, so by the time they get to adolescence or adulthood, they're just too heavy to be broken.
Yeah, one of his little frameworks I love is inversion thinking, which is when you have a goal or something you're trying to achieve, write the list of all the things you could do to not achieve it, and then to reflect on how many of those you're actually already doing, but to make that your do not do list, and then also do the opposite of those things, which it sounds so simple, but when you do it, it's actually highly effective. It's a great little process.
And someone that had their fair share of loss in life. Unfortunately, lost a son at a very young age and a range of other things. Was a veteran, served his country. I made a little short video of a few of his quotes.
People don't seem to get that point. You have any idea why, Charlie?
Warren, if people weren't so often wrong, we wouldn't be so rich.
No.
Yeah, I think you would understand any presentation using the word EBITDA if every time you saw that word, you just substituted the phrase bullshit earnings. I like cryptocurrencies a lot less than you do. To me, it's just dementia. Professional traders that go into trading cryptocurrencies, it's just disgusting. It's like somebody else is trading turds and you decide I can't be left out. I don't think there are good arguments against my position. I think the people that oppose my position are idiots. And so, no, I'm optimistic about life. If I can be optimistic when I'm nearly dead, surely the rest of you can handle a little inflation. And of course, that's the other advice. The best way to get what you want in life is to deserve what you want. How could it be otherwise? It's not crazy enough so that the world is looking for a lot of undeserving people to reward. A director getting $150,000 a year from a company who needs it is not an independent director. Well, you don't want to be like the motion picture executive in California, and they said the funeral was so large because everybody wanted to make sure he was dead. It was investment banker aided fraud. Now, not exactly novel.
Charlie's big on lowering expectations.
Absolutely. That's the way I got married. My wife lowered her expectations. Sure, there are a lot of things in life way more important than wealth. All that said, some people do get confused. I play golf with a man. He says, what good is health? You can't buy money with it. You are mixing something which is wretched and irrational and has bad consequences with something that has very good consequences. But you know, if you mix raisins with turds, they're still turds.
That's why they have me write the annual report.
Well, lucky, similar to Charlie, how I got married was my wife getting to a point where her expectations were so low that by the time I came along, he was receptive. So that's good.
I'm going to miss their banter when they play off each other. Like, just so many great lines. Someone needs to bring out some Charlie Munger quote shirts because there's some crackers.
Something I found interesting, so I searched up the compound annual growth rate for Berkshire Hathaway from 1965 to 2021, and they've compounded at 20.1%.
Over that entire period.
Unmatched. Like, that is crazy.
What was one of his lines? If everyone else wasn't wrong all the time, we wouldn't be so rich.
Yeah. I actually haven't delved into a lot of Charlie's work, but I actually ordered, so today the new Poor Charlie's Almanac's just been released. I've got that ordered and it's on the reading list for the summer, so looking forward to it.
All right, we look forward to a few one-liners.
Yeah.
One-liners, Jack. And so an article came out this week called the Enduring Lessons of 33 Years in Startups. You guys have a chance to see that?
Yeah, had a read through. I was a bit underwhelmed. Like, they've looked at all these different startups and tried to draw lessons out of them. And the 7 lessons they came up with, it was live and die by your people. And then when they described that, it was kind of like culture and hiring the right talent and everything. Innovation matters. Yeah. Don't get lonely, which was talking about the founder and making sure you're connected with others because it's a tough journey. Be careful who you partner with, which I think is true of life and everything. Cash is king. Debt can be dangerous, and celebrate your successes.
So I'd put all of those as the required but not sufficient.
Yeah. You can do all those things and still end up absolutely nowhere and in the trough of effery.
The reason why we've added it here is all of those things are required, but for listeners, go deeper. Because actually a lot of that is not actionable, because I'd say that the majority of people that have failed probably did sort of all of those, although live and die by your people can sometimes be hard. But hey, how do you find the right people? When there's conflict, how do you handle it? How do you get the mind into the right roles and structures? How do you maintain trust and respect when trust and respect is in the toilet? How do you get product market fit in an environment where you're not getting product market fit? Look, I think these articles are important to get some thinking going, but in my experience, if it's in a generic article, it's almost not sufficient. That's almost the filter where, okay, what else do I need out of this?
I agree. They're generic, but you've got to go deeper on them. At the core of any startup, right? People and culture. So go deeper on that. And how are you going to foster and calibrate your culture that's going to bring on an innovation so you can iterate, take on and fix the problems that are inevitable, that are going to come your way. And then, like, cash is king and debt is dangerous. It's just a good reminder, given the current environment where we're at. Like, we've pivoted from growth at all costs to efficiency and getting to profitability. So it's take these lessons and go 10 times deeper on each one, and there are some, like, relevance there.
I think the key word that you use there is how.
Yeah.
And that's often what doesn't get told. So sure, absolutely, innovation matters. I think anybody would say that innovation matters. But as an example, if you've got, whether it's a small business or a big business, and you're paddling like hell to keep the doors open and get the cash in, how do you maintain a culture of innovation when you're struggling to just get early side? And when you're big and you're fat and you're happy and you've got all the cash flows, it's still the same issue, but a different problem, which is how do I maintain innovation, but in a world of fat and happiness? So yeah, innovation matters. Got it. Check. But how? Yeah. How do we go and implement that?
Yeah, and balancing it. I mean, we startups that spend their life in the innovation side, not actually commercializing or not seeing the J-curve aspect because they're too busy launching the next thing. And so getting that balance right. And to your point, Jack, around the team, like they often talk about culture, but how do you choose what is the right culture for your organization with what you're trying to achieve, your brand positioning, the market that you're in, what your clients need to feel of your brand and everything else. Culture is this evasive thing how do you actually choose the right culture? And then when you choose that, how do you select for that? How do you engineer that? Like, how do you maintain that?
How do you maintain it? And that's that is the content of our offsites, those kinds of aspects. So yeah, good that it's just use it as a point of reflection. But then to me, it's always just ask how. Flowing on from that, there was a couple of LinkedIn posts that have started to come out that just reiterate that not only is funding down, so that's a no-brainer. Everybody has felt that. But some stats on that founding is starting to come down as well. So people are not even taking the plunge at the same rate that they used to.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that's on a 5-year average. So yeah, and it makes sense to me. I think the pressure on household spend, the pressure on cost of living, global uncertainties, I think the risk appetite or the ability of someone to step out, particularly in a family context, and take that risk of launching something. But I think the other thing is when adversity drives entrepreneurship as well. So it'd be interesting to see how this cycle kicks next. But yeah, I can't say I'm really surprised by the data. It intuitively makes sense. But the rate, like they're saying, founding is down 47% versus the 5-year average. That's a significant drop.
Yeah, I'll just bring up that chart. So for the YouTube watchers, you can see it there. And for the listeners out there, it's peaked in 2020 and then has just been a trailing run downhill. And then the rounds peaked in 2021, which makes sense. We've got all that data and that continues. So there's an aspect of people that aren't surviving probably, and then there's just an aspect of people that are not starting in the first place. And that then dovetails. Now, this is US data, but Peter Walker from Carter put out something that the data on startups shows that the number of startups that raised 10 million, right? So these are only the companies that raised $10 million or more. Those companies shutting down has jumped 240% just in 2023 through to November. And so I think that's a really interesting lesson because in order to have raised more than $10 million, you had to have had some really strong signals, a good story, good chat, all of that. But some of these companies went too hard, too quick, blew the capital, couldn't demonstrate it, couldn't get faith. And unfortunately, this is the consequence, I would humbly submit, unhealthy growth. They took that capital, they didn't grow in a healthy manner, and here we are.
Yeah, and because it's comparison to year prior, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, and we've been expecting to see this data in terms of coming off the high of investment in 21, the total capital deployed, the number of deals, and everything we've been hearing about companies kicking the can down the road with some venture debt or just some internal rounds and getting lean again, trying to bring it back to cash flow positive. But inevitably, we were expecting to see this higher rate of failure starting to play out. And personally, I think it's just the start. I think we're going to see more of this in the next 6 months.
I asked some investors last night at drinks, just, hey, what's your vibe? Next year starts to come back up and everybody's happy, or is it a continuation? And all of them said it was a continuation of current. And that sort of aligns with my life's experience. When you think things are difficult, the universe says, hold my beer.
Yeah,
I'll show you difficult. And as we've discussed prior, it's those that really want it, that can really get back to product market fit. And where we're going to go to in today's episode is really about focusing on really smart growth strategies where resources are just really hard to come by. It's now resourcefulness. And so how do you turn $1,000 into $10,000? And then how do you turn $10,000 into $100,000, then into $1 million? Gone are the days where I'm going to give you $1 million and hopefully you'll turn it into something. So no, you're going to have to demonstrate and show me at a low level.
Yeah, you said something to me once when we were talking about, this was years ago, about markets, and you're like, markets are designed to extract the most amount of human pain and suffering.
Yeah. The role of the market broadly is to ensure that the majority of people are wrong the majority of time, and a market can stay irrational for longer than you can stay solvent.
Yeah.
Like the whole role of the market is just to cause you extreme fucking distress, which is why it's so hard to eke out a dollar. But for those that get a really good product, a cult following, product market fit, they can go on and achieve great things. Did you see some of the articles that are coming out about Rode microphones, who we use? I must admit, this office is literally filled. I have got more Rode stuff in here.
Yeah.
Like, it is an embarrassment, but it's amazing.
So I've got to move house and packing all this stuff, and I found all these boxes of like extra podcast gear and video gear, and I've got 3 of these mics. It's just like sensational product and brand loyalty because it's quality. And the company's been doing really well. But yeah, there's some news out, and I think, Don, you wanted to make a plea to them that it was.
Yeah, so there was an article out where the founder and rich lister, Peter Friedman, was just talking about the next evolution of Rode. They've got a valuation of over $1 billion. And in that article, it talks about wanting to be the biggest. Now, I appreciate there is a general male fascination with size, but putting that aside, the plea is don't concentrate on size. Concentrate on health. If you can build the healthiest organization that can then grow and scale and deal with all of those issues, those are the ones that prevail over the long term. If you're just arbitrarily going size, because now they're starting to do acquisitions. And so companies that then start to grow by acquisition that haven't built an acquisition prowess yet, it's just difficult and hard. But if your driving factor is size, I want to be the biggest, 9 times out of 10, that strategy leads you to all sorts of fuck-ups versus I want to be the healthiest. That may well mean that you end up being the biggest. But if you're putting health and the development of your organization and the long-term in the center, it's going to help you to say no things to things that you ordinarily might say yes to. But at the same time, if you're really healthy and you can take on certain things, you'll be able to say yes to things that you potentially couldn't. So I know it's a hobby horse that I like to flog, but I just at every point reiterating healthy development beats arbitrary growth. And that video that we played of Ishak a little while ago, from the human point of view, cancer and tumors are technically growth.
Yeah.
Right? They are expanding, but they're the only thing that grows for their own purpose in the human body. Right? Everything else is there to serve some other purpose. Cancer just serves itself. You don't want arbitrary growth. You don't want cancer. So anyway, please, I love the tech. Don't do something that harms the tech.
It's a great product.
Now, while we're on this theme of healthy growth and just health and unhealthiness in general, we couldn't continue this episode and not talk about Elon. Did we get a chance to have a look at his little meltdown
Yes. How could you not? It's doing the rounds on every piece of social media or even mainstream media.
That morning's time, I think a big thunderstorm had come through and the whole household gets woken up at 2:30. I can't sleep. So then I go into the office and then I saw it and I first thought it was an AI. I
did too. I thought it was a deep fake.
Yeah, deep fake of making Elon look like a fucking idiot, but then sound like one as well. And then it was like, no, this is actually real. So I watched the whole 90-minute episode there and then, just enthralled, because I've been on the Elon's not what he's cracked up to be bandwagon before it was cool. Can I just be that guy and put that out there? Because when you read the depositions from years ago, when you read the court cases, when you read all the stuff that people generally don't, there was always a very different Elon that now we're seeing, now we're learning. And what we know is that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when you've got no guardrails, when you amass what he's amassed, it just descends into madness.
Yeah. Oh, look, there's a whole discussion in that around, could someone achieve what Musk has achieved without those characteristics?
I think the answer is no. I think strengths overplayed become your weaknesses, but I don't, unless you're absolute Teflon, willing to behave in that manner, willing to treat people in certain manners, willing to have such disregard for life, like all of these things, I think this is just the consequence and the outcome of that gone too far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just play it for those at home who have been living under a rock quickly.
What was that trip like? And obviously, you know that there's a public perception that, and you're clarifying this now, but there's a public perception that was part of a apology tour, if you will. That this had been said online. There was all of the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob Iger today.
I hope they stop.
You hope?
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f*** yourself.
But
go f*** yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience.
well, let me ask you then.
That's how I feel. Don't advertise.
How do you think then about the economics of X? If part of the underlying model, at least today, and maybe it needs to shift, maybe the answer is it needs to shift away from advertising. If you believe that this is the one part of your business where you will be beholden to those who have this view, what do you do?
F-Y.
I understand that, but there's a reality too, right?
Yes. No.
I mean, Linda Yaccarino's right here, and she's got to sell advertising.
Absolutely. So, totally. No. Actually, what this advertising boycott is going to do, it's going to kill the company.
And do you think that
and the whole world will know that those advertisers killed the company, and we will document it in great detail.
But those advertisers, I imagine, are going to say, we didn't kill the company.
Oh yeah.
They're going to say,
tell it to Earth.
But they're going to say, Elon, that you killed the company because you said these things, and that they were inappropriate things, and that they didn't feel comfortable on the platform, right? That's what they're going to say.
And let's see how Earth responds to that.
This goes back to
we'll both make our cases,
right,
and we'll see what the outcome is.
What are the economics of that for you? I mean, you have enormous resources, so you can actually keep this company going for a very long time. Would you keep it going for a long time if there was no advertising?
I mean, if the company fails because of an advertiser boycott, it will fail because of an advertiser boycott. And that will be what bankrupted the company, and that's what everybody on Earth will know.
But what do you think then of this goes back to the idea of trust, though.
Then it'll be gone. And it'll be gone because of an advertiser boycott.
But you recognize that some of those people are going to say that they didn't feel comfortable on the platform. And I just wonder and ask you and think about that for a second.
Tell it to the judge.
But the judge is going to be...
the judge is the public.
That meme where the guy's riding on the bike and then puts the stick in the front wheel.
Yeah.
And then falls over and then goes off that fucking guy. Like Elon behaves the way Elon does. Brands say, I can't be associated with this platform. And then he goes on and says, you're the reason why it's dying or it's going to die. And then then Earth is going to know that you killed it. It's like,
yeah,
breathtaking.
100%. Look, I'm sure we all have these kind of flaws, maybe a bit more.
Oh, we absolutely
less
do.
overt and subconscious, and we self-sabotage. But this is just overt, completely owning. Can you imagine being a shareholder and you're like, how on earth would you continue to back?
His chairman, when doing like South by Southwest, won't even mention his name, won't even talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk about money can buy you for turning their backs on certain things. Fuck, have a look at it.
Yeah. Look, it's entertaining.
No, it is entertaining.
Entertaining like
Well,
a dumpster.
I hope nobody gives him an enema, because if you gave that boy an enema, you could bury him in a matchbox. So,
oh dear.
on that note, we can leave the Don Gets Unhinged.
I feel like we need a little musical segue to the unhinged pit.
Don demonstrates his own personality flaws, the bullying that probably occurred to him at kindergarten, and the lack of healthy development of his brain.
At least you do a lot of self-work to work out what the causality is.
Yeah. I just can't seem to resolve it. All right, let's get on to something a bit more functional so listeners can leave this episode with some value. So this 20 VC episode came up and it was called The Golden Rule to 100 million in ARR, why CAC to LTV is BS early on, why your first growth hire should be a former founder, how to do 200 growth experiments a quarter with Gilmain Carbane. You guys get a chance to listen to it?
Yeah, this was an awesome podcast. Like lots of golden nuggets in this one.
Harry is our North Star in terms of us being in the podcast world. What we're about to discuss here and share is not a replacement for listening to that episode, and we would highly recommend it. But I thought maybe the best way, because there are so many great nuggets, if it's all right, I'm going to just play just some little bits and then we can discuss
Sounds good.
Our perspective.
Success in startups is being able to focus your efforts to grow faster than your competitors. If you lose focus, your competitors grow faster than you lose.
That first bit is so incredibly simple, but man, do we find that time and time again. We just can't seem to get that point across, that
focus. There's
just a relationship that people don't realize that actually less is more.
Yeah, and it's an easy trap to fall into. Right? When you have opportunities present themselves at a time where you are massively resource constrained, and you're like, oh yes, but we'll just do this and we'll get this extra cash in the door. Or if we just do this, and you end up an inch deep and a 10 mile wide, trying to satisfy so many different elements and putting so much energy into different channels or different parts of product.
And I think the way Adrian DeMarco puts it, I think is quite good. There are these bluebird opportunities that as long as it's not too distractionary, an early stage business should take over. I guess what we broadly more see is I want to go after 5 different markets at once, and I want to solve 5 different problems at once because my product is good enough to handle it. But what happens is you're dividing all of your resources, your energy, your messaging, and you're then trying to get one message or a series of messages that talk to 5 different markets with 5 different products, and it just becomes confusing. And as we've said constantly, if you confuse, you lose. Now, we try and, with some of our offsite work, a big part of it is around getting that strategic fit, that where you're going to play, how you're going to win. And often it's about choosing a market segment that is big enough. This is part of the problem. If you go too niche, you're in trouble. But often what we're trying to do is say, what's the one market that's got a one ideal client profile, that's got one big pain point that you can deliver one product to? Because then you just focus unbelievable amount of energy, your testimonials align, your messaging aligns, and you're then able to ramp faster than your competitors. But if your competitors do that better than you and then they ramp, you're stuffed.
Yeah. It is hard knowing what to say no to and what to say yes to. Like I remember when we were running a render, we were doing a lot in wireless in hotels. And it was actually, I was away on an install and my wife took a sales meeting with Ridges. And she rings me up in the middle of the meeting and says, oh, I'm just with the Ridges CTO, and they're about to do an install of IPD slams, and they just want to check what our stock levels are. And I'm on the other end of the phone going, I have no effing clue what an IPD slam is. And she's totally acting it out. She's like, yeah, if you could just check on our stock, is that something we could do? And I'm like, I'm searching. I'm like, yeah, just say we can do it and we'll work it out later. And that ended up not only unlocking Ridges on a really quick contract conversion, but unlocking a whole new product line for us that became a massive part of the business.
Totally.
And so it's so hard to know as a founder. We talk about focus. What do you say?
But that would have been in your really early phase. If you were still behaving like that,
if we were still like that
years in, and constantly doing that, and
and the other thing was it didn't change our customer segment. It wasn't a change to what we were doing. It was essentially a way of delivering what we were doing. So it's like a different infrastructure to deliver our software.
And that last bit that you said is just entrepreneurs' ability to reframe, to make it look and smell like you weren't breaking that rule. Well done, Aaron. Even after all these years, you can still convince yourself that it was within the...
breaking the rules all the time. Yeah. And then later justifying why.
Yeah. So then I thought this was interesting.
The thing I find really challenging is like doing kind of a PLG motion and an enterprise motion at the same time. Everybody and I'm always like to startups, you can't do both well. Do one, focus, and then move to another over probably 3 to 5 years, honestly.
Who does it well?
Am I wrong? Can you do both?
Who does it well, Harry? Like, name me companies that at the early stage really are really good at PLG or enterprise. It's very rare that they have one of the two motions like pinned down perfect. And so most of the time they try a bit of PLG, they try a bit of enterprise, then land most of the time in between. Segment, both PLG and enterprise sales. All of the companies I worked with, and we're going to talk about CAC, I'm sure, but mostly for CAC reasons, they optimize for efficient acquisition and selling, and they land with both motions.
Okay. So no one kind of does it well, and they kind of do both at the same time.
No, it happens. It's rare. It's extremely rare that you have super strong virality, a real PLG. I mean, most people who say, I want to do PLG, they don't do PLG. Right? They have a free plan. They have a self-serve plan. It does not mean there's virality. It does not mean that people invite each other. Right? Even the people I love and care about, we think of something like a Ramp. I love them to death. Amazing company. Do you think there's PLG? Do you think CFOs randomly invite other CFOs to use Ramp? Hell no. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't work like that. Right? Maybe there are there's some network effects we can talk about, but there's no PLG.
Yeah, refer 5 of your friends and get a free credit card. Yes, please. Do I get an orange juice with that? That's hilarious. I agree.
So I found that one quite interesting, just the way they linked. I think product-led growth is often misunderstood by founders, and the link to virality, the way that it was described there. And then also normalizing the fact that in that early stage, there's this attempt sometimes of both PLG and enterprise. Nobody does it well, but you've got to at least understand where you're playing.
Yeah, I think there's lots of founders talk about, they say they're doing PLG, but they definitely don't have those viral loops happening. I think one of the best examples of a really effective PLG, and it was probably before it was even a thing, would be Opmantec, Gold Coast company. It was led by Danny Mayer. They had their exit, I think, about two years ago now. But what they did in terms of server management software and switching from an open source product into something that could be installed by any software server manager. But the way they created this viral effect and ended up winning a lot of enterprise customers through that. I think they're probably the one I think of who've done it really well. But yeah, lots of founders talk about having a PLG strategy
Well, what I took for later parts of the episode is just understanding that if you have a PLG product and you can get that product-led growth and you can have those attributes and you can do all those things, then great, go do it.
Yeah.
But actually, if you're more on the enterprise side of life, that you're going to then try and take an enterprise product because you're not getting that enterprise traction and I'm going to make it PLG, that just doesn't work. And then if you do have a truly PLG product, but then you create like an enterprise cost and operational level, then that's a problem as well.
My thoughts are really like what you're trying to do as a founder, and especially when you've found product market fit, is you're trying to find a repeatable, efficient and reliable way to take your product to market. So whether you're taking PLG or enterprise, it doesn't really matter. Like at the end of the day, you're trying to build a predictable machine where you can build that sales and marketing function out. And whichever approach you take, like you're taking on the information from feedback from the customers, so you'll be able to pivot. But I think it just comes back to a valuable SaaS business. What Adrian says is one that you can actually forecast and forecast accurately. And that's going to come back to how you're going to build out that function.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah. So then the next one.
I love that. And I totally agree with you. I always think now Frank Slootman's narrow the focus, increase the quality. My question to you then is, how do you know when is the right time to expand the focus? How do you know when you should go from SMB to mid-market? And also, how do you think about diversification?
I think often, and again, like the exceptions to that rule, those where you would want to invest as an investor, but generally what you see is companies find one early adopters market, one audience where, in the words of Brian Balfour, there's a message to audience fit or a product to audience fit, all right? And you start just maxing that out. You have a competitive advantage, your message resonates well, and eventually you're going to plateau because you have convinced most of the early adopters, the people that are early, that are easy to convince into your product. And the others have made the conscious decision. They don't want your product. They are happy where they are. The friction increases and you're going to start looking for new audiences. You can think, hey, this small audience is too small for us. I can't raise my price. I can't convert more of those. I can't sustain my growth there. All right. I can't do my 2x, my 3, 3, 2, 2, 2. And so you're looking for new audiences. And those new audiences will be either in different industries, in different segments, generally, more rarely in different geos. So you tend to generally go like same company size, different industries, then you go different segments, company sizes, and then you go into different geos. That's the way that I see most companies grow.
You know this shit's getting real when I get my pen out. You said 3, 3, 2, 2 when it came to growth. For people who don't know what that framework is, can you just explain that for us?
Yeah, I don't know that it's still, I'd say, the golden rule. And I don't know who came with it, but I associate it in my mind with Jason Lemkin, the godfather of SaaS here, because he's the one who's always talking about it. It used to be said that to be in the top decile of startups in terms of performance, thus in terms of valuation and funding and outcomes, you would have to grow past the first million, 3x the first year, 3x the second year, and then 2x for the next for every year for the next 3 years. So 3, 3, 2, 2, 2. Okay. Right? And if you do that, you end up at 100 million plus in revenue in 5 years.
It's as simple as that. 3, 3, 2, 2, 2.
So easy. Just go for it.
But the first part of that, what I took, it was implied that once you had reached the plateau. So the first thing that he's saying is you don't start going wide and deep and all that stuff until you've reached that plateau. Whereas coming back to that earlier point, what we often find is that in that early phase of maybe not getting the traction or just the entrepreneurial energy, start going too wide too soon when we haven't earned the right to start going elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think also not even starting to get on the curve and interpreting it as a plateau and switching out of but they haven't actually run enough experiments to work out how do you build the scalable sales machine in this area of focus. Okay, now let's ride that to the plateau. And it also implies that founders are actually measuring those metrics to know when they're on the plateau. But I love it how he breaks that down and talking about when to shift to different verticals, when to switch to different geographies, like really tangible way of looking at it.
All right, so then what is good CAC?
Like what is a good payback to you?
Anything below 12, I'd say, is good. Now, when you think of that, generally, like that's a very simple framework. If you want to be a bit smarter, you go into like CAC to LTV. Yep. Again, going back into, fintech these days with Ramp, when people onboard a financial platform, global platform like Ramp, they tend to stick for very, very long, multiple years. And so you can afford it's a something much higher in terms of payback time because the LTV is huge. People stick for 3, 4, 5, at the mid-market, 8 years. So when they stick around for 8 years, you can start being very aggressive. You can start spending like more than 1 year, maybe 2 years.
I get you. Can I just ask something? I don't like that because we're being very assumptive on the future state of markets. In 5 years' time, there may be a completely different financial protocol with, I don't know what it is, which is why it's an unknown, but the assumption that we can have 8 to 9 years as an LTV in the first 2 years of a company, I get it more if you're Visa, where we've got 50 years of data, but like for a startup, I just think LTV is bullshit. You've got no freaking idea. Am I right or am I wrong?
I understand where you're coming from. On financial products, you can see the rate at which companies have switched their their payment platforms and their like expensing platform. And it tends to be, especially at the mid-market, very slow. And it's unlikely that changes because the cost of switching is super high. All right. And that's if you look at why, Ramp, but also Brex and others have raised so much money, it's because the VCs have made the same calculations and have concluded that it is very likely that people stick for that long. That's the only reason why those companies are worth that much. It's because the churn is almost like zilch.
So then why do boards want now lower CACs?
Because most people don't have an 8-year retention timeframe. That's what it is.
Okay, so then when we think about that and we think about the CAC to LTV, what is good CAC to LTV to you? And I know they're generalized questions, but there is kind of rules of thumb where you're like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, 3-to-1 is really good.
3-to-1 is good. And great is 5-to-1.
Yeah. 3-to-1 is good. 5-to-1 is great.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things we always wrestle with a little bit in the early stage, more probably from the angel investing because it is so new. How do you get that LTV? For us on the tribe basis, because we're backing later stage companies, we do have better churn metrics, which is why we like to play there. But yeah, at least some guidance on payback within 12 months, 3-to-1, 5-to-1. It can be hard for some founders to understand.
And just to add, from my point of view, you want to understand CAC at a program level, not overall. So if you're running 10 experiments and you're doing 10 different channels, that's going to combine to give you an overall customer acquisition cost. But if you just have that as one number, it's really not helpful. Break it down to the individual experiments. And then when you know that at a program level, then you can really find which is the most efficient, reliable, and effective way to get my product to the end customer.
Often when I've first joined a board, the CAC number includes organic new customers, referrals to get that number down, 1. Yeah. 2, it doesn't actually include everybody's time. There's so many other things. And when we really then recut the CAC number properly, it scares the shit out of everyone. And in the last few years, you've been able to raise so much capital, you can gloss over that, but now you've actually got to get serious.
Yeah, and Jack, building off that, I think also tracking LTV against the different channels. So my experience was different channels brought in, even though they're the same type of customer. If you think of the diffusion curve of tech adoption, early adopters might be living in one channel and they tend to churn faster. And so what we found was the LTV across different channels was also very different. So knowing your CAC and LTV and that ratio for each channel helps you find where you should be focused, and that comes through experimentation. But you've got to track the data, and I think I think that point of most founders don't actually track the data that granular.
Yeah, and you need to have a finger on the pulse. For example, if you're doing digital ads and you don't have that at a program level, so knowing at between Meta, LinkedIn, Amazon, like if you don't have an understanding of which channel is leaking all of your funds, like you're going to lose so much money. And that's why you need it at a program level so you can quickly turn it off.
Yeah. Then they start to get into some examples, which I found quite interesting just from a creativity point of view. So let me get that up.
What's a good learning and what's a bad learning?
A good learning is a statistically significant deviation from your status quo. It's hard. I'll give you one example, okay? People often change their onboarding email, their welcome email, the whole sequence, like post sign up to get people to use the product. And they test and, it's hard to get a lift there. You know what I tell them? have you tested against a holdout, a control audience? And they tell me yes. And they tell me, oh, the control is the standard email. I say, no, you're wrong. The control is no email. Have you tried not sending a welcome email, not sending, the first 3, 4, 5 emails to get people to use the product? And of course they haven't. And I tell them, try it. Take 20, 30, whatever it takes to be statistically significant, and don't send emails. And let's see what the true deviation in activation and retention is. And you know what happens, Harry? Most of the time, it's not statistically significant. The people who are going to activate will activate regardless of getting an email or not. All right? And so the email adds no value at all.
Wow. Did you do one where actually you changed anything and it did add a lot of value and activation went way up?
That's the value of experience. And I think I think it's Luke Levesque, who's the chief growth officer at Shopify, who said that. I think growth is one of those disciplines where the knowledge of something that has worked somewhere else and that is replicable is extremely valuable and rare. That doesn't really happen in product. Like, you've done a product really well somewhere else, you can't really replicate that in another company. It just doesn't work that way. It's also not true in marketing or in engineering. But in growth, if you have something where you're able to tickle human psychology just the right way, it's likely to work again in the next company because they're still the same humans, right? I gave you an example I heard recently. One company sent verification emails, but the product does not need verification emails. You don't need to click to verify your email, but they just tried, hey, what if we ask people to verify the email? Does that bring the people back into the product? What if we do it regardless of whether they're in the product? And what if we send it twice, regardless if they verified the first time? All right? It works. It works great. Now, is it deceitful? A bit. Absolutely. Can you find a spin on that? I'll let the audience decide. But it's interesting to find that is an example of something that is very replicable in almost any SaaS business. It's very easy to implement and will drive your user retention up.
What this episode has helped me do is reframe what growth hacking, these are little experiments. These are creative people now trialing different things and then expanding your horizon. With all the products I've been involved in, I've never contemplated sending no email in that sign up and using that as the test, but I can totally imagine that it probably makes fuck all difference. And the amount of time and effort that we put into crafting that email and the different sequence and all those things, if someone was going to sign up and start using it, they're probably just going to sign up and start using it, I think is what they're putting forward. Yeah, I find it fascinating, that bit.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And what it made me think of is, because none of these things are they're not in isolation either. You're often running so many experiments, it's hard to trace back pure causality. And over time, things evolve. So even if you've put an email campaign in and you've done the testing to know that it's effective, when other things start coming in, going back to run the experiment of turning it off and seeing what's the effect of that now, given everything else that we have in place. So I love the framing of how he describes experimentation. And yeah, one of the other sessions I'm sure we're going to share as well is just finding those rate limiters. Where does this effect start to plateau as well? Before
you pump money into the channel, make sure you build the machine and make sure it's actually going to be efficient. And we see that far too many times. You raise capital and you believe this is going to be the best channel to market. You throw all the money for the new hires, but you haven't even validated whether the way you're going to get the outreaches to drive the traffic even works. So while you're lean and nimble, run as many experiments as you can and find what the equilibrium is.
So then he went on and talked about cold emails and communication just in general. So I'll hit you with that.
Some part of the population will start rejecting communication coming from anonymous people because they won't know if it's a human or not. And thus they will, by default, think that it's a robot, and thus that there is no reciprocity that should be expensed. And some other part of the population, maybe the more tech-savvy people, will not care and say, hey, is this information valuable? Right? The problem is that because the marginal cost is so low, high quality text, high quality communication about you will become huge. It's going to be all the time everywhere, and you just won't have the time for it. So it's very likely that we'll start ignoring messages from real humans at a much higher rate because the quality of AI will be better than the quality of humans.
Does that mean cold outbound's dying?
It's not cold outbound, it's communication's dying. Like personal communication's dying. It's not just cold outbound. The same is true on phone calls. Like phone calls, text calls, like blog posts, like anything that is a human written content is soon likely to be better if done by an AI.
So then what do we do? Like what replaces it? The existing channels and tactics just get bigger in terms of portion of sales? Is there net new? What if that's a total pie of net new? What does it look like?
I love the worry on your face about the future, Harry.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I think there's a few things. One is if you are on the cutting edge of tools and platforms, you will win regardless of what happens. All right. You will, because the others, like anyone who's not doing the things that I said, is already losing right now. Okay. That's the first thing. Second, this, I'd say, negative, pessimistic view of communication, AI and humans, is a few years in the future. It's not a right now issue. Okay. So you have a couple of years to like handle it. Third, I think if you ask like a wild bet, don't hold me to it in 3 or 4 or 6 years when we talk about it next time. I think it will be more about social proof, community, and relationships. I've seen a product, the name escapes me right now, which instead of a chat bot on your SaaS homepage or pricing page, connects to your LinkedIn, your email connections, relationships, and says, hey, G, Harry's using this software. You want to ask him about it? And I thought that's really smart, right? Instead of like doing random social proof about other companies, other people I don't know, it's like, hey, this connection of yours, this person you know and trust, use this software right now daily. Just ask him about it. And because I trust Harry, I know Harry. I'm like, yeah, Harry's a good guy. I know him. Just give him a call. Harry says, yeah, this is legit. I'm like, okay, cool. Done. That, you can see, has the immediate opportunity of solving the problem we just created.
I love that piece around, predicting the future of communication in a world of AI. I think of it in the context of email. I would happily have some sort of AI talking to someone else's AI that just does all of that for me. And exactly what he described, I can already feel happening. Like I received a cold inbound message on LinkedIn, which I knew was AI generated just by reading it, but it was actually something I wanted and it was relevant. So I engaged with it. And so even though I felt a little bit dirty responding to this AI message, it actually was informative, and versus all the other human generated stuff that is completely wasteful and I don't want to respond to.
Knowing you, mate, you've got so much to actually feel dirty about.
That's a separate podcast episode.
Don't start at that. Yeah, and I think just in general, it's going to force that whole social connection and community, and that idea I think is quite fascinating of all of us in business. We get a client, we try and get a testimonial, and we try and get other people to look at that testimonial and then connect it back to themselves. Whereas that point of at scale, being able to say, hey, this person that you know and that you engage with is using this thing, you go and have a chat to them. Yeah. Being able to do that at scale or to be able to get that community and reciprocity, I think is impressive.
Yeah, I think AI is going to introduce a different way of doing things. So maybe things that have worked in the past now won't work. And as a founder, you're going to have to be you have to update your beliefs quite regularly, because what's working today may not work tomorrow just because of how fast they're shipping these new features with AI.
Yeah, going back to the conversation that started around, we were making jokes about conversations with investors last night. Will AI replace us? But coming back to human relationships, trust and respect, like social proof, by nature of knowing others. Like I think these things will become, they've always been highly relevant, but even more relevant in a world where everything else can be automated and optimized by AI.
And even ourselves, we really like the episode we did with Adrian DeMarco, the last one, the investor focus one. I think there's some unbelievably good insights in there that we were toying with the idea of being proactive in sending that out to people. But even crafting that message, some of the people in the LinkedIn we do know, we don't know. How do we make sure we're not like these other dicks that send you stuff? And there's a whole lot of complexity that goes into it. But coming back to community reciprocity and how to make it as human as possible. So they then went on talking about reciprocity creates responses. And I found this both interesting and incredibly true.
Oh, and I love this example in this bit. I think it's a really powerful example.
It brings me to my biggest challenge, so actually, with kind of growth and growth marketing, which is when you have horizontal SaaS products. It could be Airtable, it could be Dropbox, it could be any of these. They can be used by dentists, they can be used by product managers, and the use cases are so different. So to get messaging that resonates across that spectrum is so tough. How do you think about that horizontal product marketing being done well and resonating and getting in their psychology?
You know what's fantastic? We live in 2023, and now you have AI products, Chat, GPT, you name it, all the ones that you love, and you can build personalized content with a scale that you never dreamed of before, which is at a quality that was unachievable before. And what people care, especially in horizontal products, is that you talk about them, their problems, their challenges. I might go back on what I said just earlier. You asked me what was the biggest mistake. Actually, it's probably that companies, marketers, talk of them and their product first. They don't talk about you, the audience, and your problems. They say, hey, here's my product, here's what we do, here's our customers, here's why we are great. And you know what? As a recipient, I don't care. I really don't care. I've got other things to care about in my day than like a random company I never heard about, right? But if you reach out to Harry and you have context on his business, what he does, what he loves and care, what challenges you have a really good assumption that he's facing right now, like it's much more likely that you can pique his interest. These days, with large language models, you and injected data about, hey, is this a dentist? What's the size of the dentistry? Where are they based? Are they in the mission, in the SF? What problems might they have? Right? Is it, office issues, like whatever that is, right? You can start being extremely specific and relevant. And relevance creates reciprocity. Reciprocity gets you responses.
Can you just unpack that for me? Relevance creates reciprocity. Reciprocity gets you responses. Can you just break that down?
There are two things that work when you try to reach out to someone that you don't know, a prospect, all right? Whether it's like by email, by whatever the communication channel. True value, your communication, let's call it an email, contains something that's really helpful. I can give you an example. And the second is reciprocity for humanness. They truly believe it comes from a human, and thus they will feel compelled to respond because somebody else has spent some time. Let's unpack those two here, okay? True value. So give you an example. Gorgeous again, right? A support platform for merchants. Merchants sell, these days a lot, of course, on TikTok, but also on Instagram. Instagram is a major platform for merchants, right? And what we found out is that sometimes some customers, potential customers of the merchant, of the brand, posted negative comments on a brand's post, and nobody took care of that. We said, hey, that's a miss from the brand, but wait, can we scrape that? Can we automate that? We found out that we could. And so we started scraping and automating the detection of negative comments on brand posts on Instagram, sending it to the brand owner, to the company owner, to the marketing leader, and says, hey, Harry, love your products, love what you do, but just let you know there's like a couple of negative comments here on your posts, and it's been 48 hours, you haven't responded, and really you should. That's it. Don't talk about Gorgeous, don't talk about the product. This works super well. Why? When it's public. I'm not doing anything like, sneezy, like it's just on Instagram, like anyone can see that. True, you can see, you can verify, you can click on the post, you'll find the negative comment, it's not me. And second, like it's helpful. Absolutely, you should take care about it. You should respond if you haven't, right? You see those three things, the only response you can have is thanks. Thanks for catching it, thanks, that's it. Of course, I'll follow up to that email with an ask for demo. And of course you will be compelled to give me your time, because you would really be a douchebag not give me some of your time, given that I found some mistakes that you made in your brand, right? So super high response rates there, okay? That's value. I have a million examples of that. If you can drive value about mistakes, problems of the business you have discovered that your audience does not know, you will get engagement, guaranteed.
Did that scale?
Yeah, absolutely.
because it's
Instagram's big, man. Instagram is huge.
But I'm saying, but that like takes a lot to craft each one, to pull in the different comments, to package them efficiently.
It's all automated. These days, you can build scrapers and automation fairly efficiently. The cost of doing that is not that high, and the challenge is finding those opportunities, those pockets of opportunity, and scaling those. That's a challenge, for sure. Okay.
Yeah, but that does scale. I mean, that's much more scalable than say like paid, where you will see.
But wait, think of the CAC of that. That's why I love growth, right? There is an upfront cost to finding that, testing it. Of course, we don't automate anything before we test it manually. We had like some junior people like send a couple hundred manually to see if it works. And once we knew the response rates were huge, we then like invested in doing it with our engineers. But once you've built it and you've amortized the upfront cost, the marginal cost of that email is zero. You're just running a few scripts. The acquisition cost of doing that is zero. And if your competitors are not doing it, you have like this like green ocean in front of you with like this no competition, $0 CAC. That's competitive moat.
Are they still doing it today?
I don't know that they're still doing it today. You'd have to ask them.
That's what was the response rate? It's like, just so is it like 50%? Is it like...
No, it's more like 10-12%. 10-12%, which is about 5x the, say, standard response rate of a good cold email. Reciprocity. You want to go in reciprocity?
Yeah.
The other thing that creates responses. Now, here's the thought experiment I want you and the audience to have. At home, you have a mailbox, a physical mailbox. In that mailbox, you receive junk mail, right? Most of it is junk mail. You take that junk mail, you throw it away. You don't even think about it. You don't care. You have no personal feelings. You have no emotions to that junk mail. You feel maybe even light about throwing it away. Now, let's say you go through that junk mail as you throw it away. There's this one letter, that's sealed letter, that's obviously written by a human, obviously by an old person. And there's your name, Harry, on it. Harry Stebbings written on it, all right? And there's the return address behind it. And they even maybe like lick the stamp and put it on the envelope. You're very convinced as a human. How likely are you, Harry, to take that envelope and throw it in the trash without opening it?
No.
No way. No way, right? You would be a psychopath if you did that. I tested that thought experiment at SaaStr in front of hundreds of people. Not one person raised their hand. Not one, which makes sense.
But how do you do that with email? Because with physical, you can do the nice stamp, the nice textured letter, whatever it is. How do you do that with email?
Give you an example? I always get examples, right? Ramp. And all of those examples have been made public, which is why I can share them. Ramp, targeting financial platform, targeting CFOs. Notoriously difficult audience to engage with, all right? And almost nothing we can scrape about a company or a CFO is useful. They're not posting about their financial issues on Twitter, right? On X, right? This doesn't happen. What we did is we scraped the link.
Wouldn't you love that? Oh, we've got so much data that we just don't know where it is. We're really missing our payments right now. God, this is so much better than LinkedIn's posting.
So what we did is that we scraped, very typical, their LinkedIn profile, their colleges. And here's the trick. Because everyone does that, okay? The trick is we thought about what's the commonality between CFOs. They're all well-educated. They all went to college, like 100%, right? Went to college, okay? In the US, very specifically about the US, people who went to a US college tend to be very passionate about their college sports team. Very passionate, right? Look at the games. So what we did is that we matched two data sets, the college where each CFO went and the upcoming games of that college against the opponent team. We then built a very simplified betting algorithm to see, is the CFO's team likely to win or lose? And we send that in an email and say, hey, Harry, your team, the Sharks or whatever, is going against like the Bisons or whatever next week. And I'm ready to bet $50 that your team is about to lose. If you win up on top, I'll give you $50, no question to ask. If you lose, I'll just ask for a 20-minute call. Now, that is a typical $50 for a call email. But, and here's the but, the sophistication of the email with this upcoming game that you know about, the ability to be able to bet for free, what looks for free on sports, which people love, makes it feel so human. Nobody believes this is automated, but it is. Nobody believes it's automated. People are like, hey, somebody actually researched, somebody knows the upcoming game, somebody cares about something that I care about too. This is fun. The response rate here is 12 to 15%. About the same when it's selling gorgeous. Again, for a very, very small cost and something that no one in their right mind would think of doing manually.
It's very smart. It's very smart.
That is reciprocity. You see that, you immediately believe, hey, there's a human that cares, like, at least I have to respond. At the minimum, I have to respond.
The start of that is very Don Miller. No one gives a crap about you. Talk about them, their problems, build relevance. Like that, and when the sessions we run on building a scalable sales machine, it comes back. Start there.
You cannot have a scalable sales machine if you don't have a message that resonates with the counterparty. And the message that most resonates with the counterparty is when you communicate back to them in their language, their problems and their desires.
Yeah.
So,
and it's a sequencing thing. Like, you know, I think it's a natural human thing to try and build credibility up front. It's, hey, we're awesome because, but the other person isn't even listening to that at that point. They're absorbed in their own shit.
Yeah.
And so building relevance and speaking to their problems first, later can come all the credibility and about you and all that when they're at that point of the decision-making process.
Yeah. And the true value, relevance creates reciprocity. And that starts with that true value and then that reciprocity for humanness. And I think that's the bit that I'm really trying to get my head around with AI and even in some of our own marketing efforts. How do we ensure that we inject as much humanity into it as possible so we can then separate it out, right?
Yeah, I think about this a lot for us. I look at that investor database in our syndicate and a lot of them are relationships built over 10 years of giving. And how do you scale that?
And if you've got a deep relationship with them that's built out of giving and that connectionness, and you start peppering them with stuff that clearly is not, you're going to have a problem. And I think that's the same for a lot of our investee companies. They've got to be careful that they don't start adopting some of this tech and this approach and see it as a panacea to go and either drive a range of sales outcomes, because the people on the other end will smell if it's not real. Any thoughts, Jack?
No, I agree. So yeah, takeaway there would be for a founder, run these closed experiments in enough of a sample size that you can actually get validation that it will work before you try and scale that. Because if you do a cold outreach that's automated to 5,000 of your 10,000 market size customers, you're going to burn the relationship real fast.
Yeah. So there were some ideas in there of different strategies, different channels. So they then go on about when should you jump between different channels.
So the question I have from founders is like, hey, this channel's working, it's working well. How should I think about the other channels? And I'm normally saying, hey, don't get too cute. Facebook ads is working, just pummel it. Keep going until it doesn't work. Obviously you want to transition quickly, but don't be too cute too early. Do you agree with that? Or do you think actually diversification is important early?
I'm in between. I'm in business. I don't like to be surprised. And what that means is if I'm going to raise a series A or B, whatever your stage is, I want to know, like, can I actually spend that money? Like, do I have like more than like hypothesis that I know how to spend that money? And so I recommend increasingly as you go through the stages to just test the CAC and the depth of those channels. I'll give you one example. Let's take like paid on Facebook as you named, right? Do you really know what's the depth of that channel? No, right? How do you do it? I recommend companies to 2x the budget every week until it flatlines. Just do it for like 4 weeks, 6 weeks. It's not gonna like burn your budget, your entire like capital, right? But just 2x on week 2. 2x on week 3, 2x on week 4. Very quickly, you're going to find out where the cap is. All right, you can find you're not getting more like engagement, more clicks, more revenue, and then you can scale back and can tell your board, "Hey, board, we've pressure tested the depth of that channel, and we know how much money we can spend on that channel." And you then go and do the same on every other channel. I did the same for me on emails. It's like, what's the maximum number of emails somebody can receive before there's like negative outcomes? Is it like once a year, once a quarter, once a month? Let's just take a small sample and let's go down. And like, obviously like there's like diminishing effects, right? And because like this has not been published, I can't like share the outcome, but like you should test it. Test the same way in every channel and then go back to your boss and say, hey, we know the depth of email. We know the depth of like paid. We know the depth of every other channel. This is why we need to raise money and this is how we can spend it.
How do you know when you've truly hit it? Is it that obvious? Is that gray? Do you know what I mean? If we're doing Facebook and it's like, yeah, we're a couple of % less effective. Is that the depth? Or
well, to exit again and you'll find it. Like eventually you won't be able to spend more money. There's a point where you can't spend more money or you're spending more, you're not getting more engagement. All right. If you're not sure, to exit again.
I think people worry about destroying a channel too quickly. Do you know what I mean? Like accelerating.
Take a sample. Take a randomized sample of the audience. If you can't do that, it means your target market is too small and you should be doing ABM. You're not doing like high scale stuff. If you have like, let's take Gorgeous again. Like if you have like 200,000 companies, can't you take 5,000 companies, 2,000 companies? Like the smallest audience Facebook will let you have like 2,000 and like really increase the budget there. If you burn those 2,000 out of 200,000, burn 1% and you've learned the outcome of the channel, is it not worth it?
I think it is.
I like his answers. His answers are just, there's no excuses.
Yeah, no excuses. And working backwards, I like, if your market is too small and you can't go and burn, so to speak, a group on that learning and testing things like depth and what works, then actually some of these really high volume scaling strategies are not for you. And you need more of a hand-to-hand account management kind of approach. And we see this all the time where entrepreneurs are trying to use a high volume scale lead gen for a product and a market that is not destined for high volume.
Yeah, that's really relevant with one of our new portfolio codes. There's in one market segment for them, there's 200 companies globally, like huge fleet enterprise.
One of our others, like this whole Australian market is 20 customers.
Yeah.
But that could still be $1 billion business because those 20 customers have millions of customers. So it's B2B to C.
Yeah, I love everything about that little segment. I think that double again and keep running until you find that threshold, and doing that before your Series A so that you can come in and say, hey, here is how we will spend the money and here is what we will get out of that, because we know that because we've run these experiments.
If founders came to us and said, here's all the experiments we've run, this is what worked, this is what didn't, this is where we're going to apply the capital because we've done some small tests. Holy moly, that's powerful. That would change. What are your thoughts, Jack?
Yeah, I think for listeners, you'd be surprised. We see so many pitches and the depth that founders say they go into it's not actually true. It's give us the money and then we'll go and test. But really it's do the testing, then come to us. We'll give you the growth capital. And that's how it should work. And I think now it's going to be harder to get capital. Things are going to change and that's what we're going to start to see.
Yeah, I think those really cockroach-like growth hackers that can take some of these ideas and... If
there is anyone listening that knows of a local growth hacker in the Australian ecosystem, we love to get them on the podcast. I really enjoyed the podcast Harry did on 20VC there. It'd be great to hear from a local perspective.
Yeah. One other thing before we wind up on this, totally, because parts of this... that's not on the stuff we're going to share, but they talk about doing this properly. They believe in the whole of the US there's only probably 200 people, which I thought was interesting. But one of the other things I think founders sometimes get wrong is how to actually measure the pipeline, how to actually score leads. So I'll play this one.
Can you just help me understand, how do you approach marketing KPIs to dollars? And just take me through it. Imagine I'm a founder trying to understand.
Reject any KPI that is vanity. You don't care about traffic. You don't care about any of those KPIs. The only thing you care about is weight-adjusted pipeline dollars. So all of those KPIs, engagement KPIs, your growth team, your marketing team needs to convert them based on lead score, based on company size, on stage, your usual close rate, what that. Every single logo that engages with your brand at any stage needs to be converted into a dollar figure. You then sum those, and you have a pipeline by stage that is not just for your sales team, that is also for your marketing team. Your marketing team has a funnel, from like TAM to MQLs, drilling down to SQLs, then over to your sales team. They should have a pipeline figure per stage. And based on your conversion rate, you should give them goals at every stage of that pipeline. The key learning is what has worked for sales also works for marketers. If a marketing candidate that you're looking to hire does not own a pipeline figure, that is the wrong candidate, my friend.
Can I ask you a pipeline figure? I can give you bullshit though. I can feed your pipe with a lot of low quality leads, and then
you don't have a good lead score. Then your lead score is bad. If your lead score is good and your pipeline is adjusted with the lead score, that should not happen.
Talk to me about that relationship between lead score and pipeline and how founders can and should use it.
Let's say your ACV is 10K, simple, okay? And your lead score predicts a likelihood to close of 30%, given the stage and the company data, firmographics, whatnot, okay? Company size and champion. So the value of that company in your pipe is $3,000. It's not 10, it's 3. If the lead score is shit, maybe it's 1, maybe it's 0, okay? You don't count the 10, you count the 3. And if you can't make that prediction, then you should be working on the lead score.
How many people have this in place, do you think?
All the ones who are winning, I want to say. No, I'd say most companies that I talk to have a lead score or some form of a lead score. Sometimes it's not great, but these days it's fairly easy to build a lead score. You could like outsource it to a company like Matt could do, friends of mine. You could build it on a modern AI platform like Akio. Like there's like even HubSpot has like simplified models for that. If you haven't think of like the lead score, it means you haven't thought of your ICP. If you haven't thought of who's a good customer for you, you just stop everything and just go define who are the good customers and what are their attributes.
So much I could say about this one. Especially at the start there, vanity metric. We see this all the time. How many funds, VC funds, go out and say, oh, we saw 5,000 deals last year and invested in 3. That is not success. That to me, it's not raw volume. And same with government grants, like the Ignite Ideas grant. It's like, oh, we get 700 applicants per round and 4% are successful. That's horrendously bad. There are 96% of founders wasting time on a grant that they will never get. And recently, VCDF celebrating we had 80 applications for funding. Congratulations, you just wasted a whole heap of time.
And we gave it to people that didn't need funding. Anyway, yeah, so I think, yes, getting rid of those vanity metrics, but I think that real lead score focus of starting to get some systemic, and it's a great lesson for us. Yeah. And then you could hear Harry then said, yeah, I can give you all sorts of shitty leads. It's, okay, but then your weighted adjusted pipeline number is going to be fucked by that lead score because the lead score is going to be low.
Yeah.
And so having those multipliers and dividers in there, and often we find marketing are like a slippery eel. They don't like measurement, can't be measured, can't possibly put some of those things. It's all the salespeople that get the measurement. But the world that we're entering in, or that we are in now, really requires all parts of the team pushing. And so being able to have that, weighted adjusted pipeline, and that marketing and sales have their own contribution for that. And if you don't think you can generate a lead score, he's quite right. We see it all the time. It's because you haven't got your ideal client profile sorted. Either there's too many of them, they're not clear, or they don't give a shit about what it is that you actually do, or they're not on the channel that you're focusing on. And so coming back to that do I have a clear ideal client profile? If I do, are there things that I can measure in their behavior that allows me to score the lead? And you're right, HubSpot, we use Entreport. We've got a very simple lead scoring basis, just based on, ours is based on how they interact with our website and the emails. And we're trying to get more sophisticated, and we'll move that into social and have a bigger picture. But it then helps us have investors and founders float to that top. And he says there, who's doing this? All the people that are winning.
Yeah, that lead score accuracy, this is something I see where you get the reports and board packs and everything else, and they have these beautiful funnels with their lead scores. But if you actually track conversion later, it's actually completely inaccurate, and they have inflated it. So making sure they're doing the analysis to feed back into their lead scores against key metrics, like what are the behaviors we need to see in order to have some probability of success that's meaningful.
And this is not about getting perfection. This is about, what is it, the Roosevelt quote? Plans are pointless, planning is priceless. This is about having to have the thought as a team. This is a process of thinking. This is when someone pushes back, especially in marketing, say, well, I can't do that because it can't be measured. Oh, what are we going to do to start measuring it? Or not letting perfection get in the way of good. If we can't measure every single thing, then the score isn't correct. Hang on, what can we measure? Can we get a little bit of momentum? How do we bring some of these other growth hacking ideas into something that's a little bit measurable?
Yeah, really good book recommendation, How to Measure Anything. It talks about exactly this. Like, even in really ambiguous, uncertain, low data environments, there are still things that you can measure and have some better insight, even if it's a marginal better insight. Yeah, highly recommend that book. There was another point in there for me, which I've now totally forgotten because I was trying to find the author of that book. Going back to your point, Don, the tension that exists between marketing, sales, and product. So marketing's, we're getting the eyeballs, and sales are like, we're getting the inquiries, it's the product, and this cycle of blame. And one of the things that was in the podcast was around having a growth team at a certain point that combines these things together. I really like that concept.
Yeah, what we're talking about with some of these almost guerrilla warfare tactics is more this growth team aspect. There's still marketing, which is more about brand awareness and all of those things. And later in the podcast, he talks about is that once the growth team isn't able to generate any more of those, your business has effectively matured. You've now quite systemized. You're at that other end of the scale. The growth team tends to die off because there's some predictability in marketing being able to generate enough stuff for sales to run with. But in this early stage, whether you're a one-person founder or 2 or 5 or 10, there's this using some of these ideas to say, actually, we need a guerrilla warfare part of this organization that tries to bring together these different things. How are we going to use AI? How are we going to use reciprocity? How are we going to do specific things like, okay, if CFOs aren't posting all of their problems online, what's the tangential thing that we could be doing to try and engage them? And in the example they use in that podcast is, let's see who's interested in their favorite football team and try and do something that brings them out of the woodwork that way. I have more shorts, but we've run out of time. And for those listening, this has probably been highly edited because we're probably close on 2 hours now. So we just, again, reiterate, I think we're going to spend a lot more time finding ideas and content in this space, because if you're in a world of less capital, you've got to become more MacGyverish. You've got to be able to get away with, Jack won't know what this actually means, but a 9-iron WD-40 and an avocado and turn that into an aeroplane. That's what we're going to do.
You have a long drive ahead. I don't know if there's an audio version of MacGyver, but you need to upskill and learn the references.
I lament your generation, Jack, missing out on these things.
We're sounding like the old uncles in the corner at Christmas.
All right, what are we looking forward to? I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight, and then the night after, and then the night after again, and then not seeing you for a while.
Yeah. Oh, we've got so much to look forward to between Brisbane Angels event and a portfolio co and our thing, and I'm looking forward to that. And then I do get to take the kids away for a couple of weeks, which will be awesome. So looking forward to that as well.
Great. And Jack is driving from Brisbane to Adelaide.
Yeah, on Saturday, lunchtime.
On a road trip with his girlfriend, which is what I love about it, is a systemic way to test a bit like the lead generation, test the depth of close quarters living in the early phases of relationship. Love it.
Yeah, find the equilibrium. How many days we can do it together?
Yeah.
What is the threshold of time spent in that closer confined space? I love it. These are great insights. And you've had to optimize your routing because of LPG gas anxiety.
Yeah, I don't want to hear any electric vehicle owners complain because LPG
if you're driving an LPG car, what Jack has to do to keep that bloody thing on the road is impressive.
And while we're here, if it always be closing, if anyone is in the market for an LPG car, please reach out.
Yeah.
Oh, one more shout out to the interns, Pat and Jai, who are on their Tri-Island, day 7 of their Tri-Island Challenge, raising funds for cancer research.
Yeah, well, we'll put the link to that in the...
Yeah, shout out there. Follow them on Instagram, and we'll share the link to the donation page.
Yeah, good.
Awesome. See you boys tonight.
See you tonight.